Here with Connell and Dickie from Pandara's Box, and we're here to talk about their upcoming projects. So, tell us a bit about yourselves.
Well, personally, we kind of started Pandara's Box originally. It was me and David first. It was originally just going to be a project at first. It was like 2 summers ago. And we were thinking of just working it and then eventually going into placement. We'd start up a company regardless, but it kind of started earlier than expected because me and Connell got into a situation where, well, personally for me, I failed the prerequisite exam to get into 3rd year.
Okay.
So I was forced to repeat it during that year, but other than that, my only options were either go on placement or take 2nd year again as a part-time year.
Okay.
But I didn't really want to kind of like work in a boring old kind of like a software company. Like, no offense at working it, but preferably not really. I'm more of a kind of person that I really want to like kind of like set my own company and work for myself. And so what me and Connell did was we kind of just kind of decided on that we would set up a company. Like.
Well, like obviously for myself, it was a case of it was the same exam, but with me it was the night before it. There was a fire in the flat next door.
Oh dear.
So yeah, I was kind of stuck with that sense that I tried the exam, pretty much fell asleep halfway through it and was just like, no, I'll not do that, cut the exceptional circumstances. Queen's very kindly let me know in September that, oh yeah, even though we said it was fine, you still have to wait the year before you can actually repeat it, so you're not allowed to progress. So I was talking to these guys in the project they've been working on, which was the kind of foundations of Slam vs. the World. Seemed pretty interesting, and it'd been something I wanted to do, was like work on my own project at some stage before going into like potentially a different company at some point. So thought it would be very interesting to try and start something ourselves and see where it went from there.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so your main game is called Slam vs. the World, yes?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about
Well, it's an action platformer, kind of along the lines of the likes of Kirby or Mega Man, in that sort of sense, where the main character takes on the abilities and forms of the various creatures and characters in the 2D world that he's traversing. But to the point where, like, obviously you'll have some characters that give you various abilities, whereas other ones just, like, there's a bunny in the demo that literally just turns you into the bunny and it has no, like, so
It's pretty much just an aesthetic form.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
both of us have played a fair bit of Team Fortress, so the idea of having a lot of visual sort of tweaks as well as mechanical ones, we thought was quite nice. But on top of that then, it's kind of got a whole time traversal sort of concept of the story where the slime is essentially immortal, and it's his way of kind of working his way through like the dawn of like dinosaur era through to like postmodern.
Yeah. And the slime is called McClippin?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, McClippin.
How did he, she, it arise?
Well, originally, for the original idea, before we worked on Slime vs. the World, well, back then it was just called Slim Slime Evolution. But originally it was 2 different ideas melded together back in the early stages of 2 summers ago. Me and David were in the middle of just kind of brainstorm isn't the term, thought boxing, kind of like multiple ideas, and my idea was more kind of like have you ever heard of the Impossible game?
Sorry.
It's the one where you're a cube and you constantly go through like different obstacles. It's kind of like an endless runner,
Okay.
and it gets faster and faster and harder and harder.
Right.
But pretty much I thought of kind of like that idea, but kind of adapted into more of a proper platformer and less of a like endless runner, and more of a story behind it about like different shapes, squares, triangles, and stuff. And David, on the other hand, his idea was kind of like a RPG with a twist. But instead, instead of playing the generic hero, as you would in a lot of RPGs, you play the enemy, you play the monsters and stuff, and that's where the slime came from. We both kind of thought the ideas that we thought of, the scope was a rather slightly more complex of what we had pitched in our concepts. So we kind of like melded the 2 ideas together and kind of like simplified slightly further down, so it was manageable to do, and eventually we came up with adorable looking slime that looks adorable in many different, hats, different shapes and forms, and the McGlippin name that kind of just came out of nowhere.
They came straight out of your mouth at some point.
Yeah, like
more the case, yeah.
yeah.
Organic,
Aye, and then I think at this point he's had Slimebo added as his like first name.
Oh,
That's entirely due to people giving feedback on the side project where anytime people were asking about our next project, it was always, oh, when Slimebo 2. So we kind of thought we'd throw some. Well, that was the main reason. It was like, it's the same character, so they have all referred to him as Slimebo, so he's kind of got the two names at this point, which is quite interesting.
Dedications for you, right?
Okay.
So you say that Metal Gear Solid is one of your big inspirations for getting into a career in games development. Now Hideo Kojima, he's well known for thinking outside the box and breaking that third law. What have you put into your game to set it apart from other platformers?
Well, to be fair, what sets our platformers apart from many others, as mentioned earlier, fair enough, ours is kind of a mixture of a Mega Man and Kirby, but what we've done with it is also, as Connell mentioned earlier, a bit of inspiration from TF2 is our game allows you, as a player, controlling the Globin, to pretty much interact with pretty much every single thing that breathes and moves. And obviously that lets you have like multiple approaches to certain obstacles or certain bosses and stuff like that, very much.
There'll be a lot of kind of hidden sort of side quests and things as well, littered about that we've like got in progress, where you'll possess a character that you might think does absolutely nothing until you maybe kind of come across what looks like background items. But say like we have one thing at the minute where like there'll be a chef in the town, and if you possess him, normally he can't do anything until you find a couple of pieces of ingredients. Okay. But which normally would just kind of roll about and be left there. Whereas only when you're playing as him can you like carry them about and do things with that, interact with them in that way, and then you can cook up a meal for the townspeople. Okay. But it's things like that where it's entirely based on the player trying to find his own way to work this. Like it's not going to be heavily signposted or anything. Yeah. So we'll just have those extra little things that if people want to delve further into it, they can.
Are there going to be like sort of like really abstract ones that you might not necessarily tell the players about, and like years down the line, to like, what, this is a new thing completely,
that's planned anyway.
Fair enough, that's good wee idea, it's nice. And you made this game through Unity, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. How did you come about deciding to choose that?
Primarily, one was that we come off the back of a project at university that was using C#, so we were comfortable with the language in terms of the scripting side of things, and obviously Unity, the core product is free to use for developers, so that's obviously a good jumping on point for ourselves, especially as students. As well as that, it's a really kind of diverse sort of piece of software. It's like can do a lot of things with the dev's input being, it's just nice to use in that sort of sense, as well as being easily available. There's a lot of libraries there and that sort of thing that we can kind of draw from, as well as being very deep in terms of how we can interact with it and put our own spin on what is available within the engine.
Yeah. Cool. So, like you said, it's free and there's a good bit of support for it. Yeah. Do you think this is the reason why there's such a rise in indie games right now?
I think it's certainly a heavy influence on it anyway. I know obviously there's maybe a couple other similar sort of things like Construct that have kind of come into play recently, but especially Unity, the fact that it has become so high profile and it's cross-platform as well. That's
very versatile.
Yeah.
Very
the fact
versatile.
that we're developing Slime vs. the World primarily for like PC and desktop or whatever, potentially for consoles down the line, but like our minigame, it was the same build that we altered the camera and we could just export it out onto like mobile devices very handily. Just obviously we changed the actual mechanics of the game, but in terms of what we were working on, it's very easy to kind of switch between various platforms, and that's brilliant if you're trying to get as much out of each product as you want.
Northern Ireland, it is growing, especially in the video game development side of things. Why do you think this is?
I suppose it's just because of for the past couple of years, recent trends of Kickstarter, and obviously from other countries, there's a lot of indie devs turning up and stuff, and as well as probably I'd say the Invest NI have recently as well for the past couple of years have actually back then they probably wouldn't have batted an eyelid for indie devs, but recently we've had a couple of people, the likes of Matt Johnson as well as many others like Donald Phillips, they've kind of been pushing for the growth of the video game, the indie games dev industry in Northern Ireland, and it's they kind of get their word out, and Invest and I have like pretty much, I'd say early on they probably take a gamble on it. These past couple of years, there's been a lot of successes with like different companies because of the grants that, especially the SIF grant.
The Arts Council and NI Screen have been doing the same as well, but it is sort of the idea that somebody higher up has kind of seen the likes of, obviously the big ones, the likes of Minecraft or Fez, or those sort of games that have just been better encoded and taken off so quickly that I think people are, not just the government side of things, but people themselves are kind of catching on that the infrastructure is there, especially online, for people to get their product. If they have a cool idea and it's really fun and enjoyable, people can find it, they will be able to play it. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, if it was a case of having to battle with like paying the stupid price for a dev kit for like the Xbox or whatever, whenever it first launched, it wasn't feasible. Whereas, especially with PC kind of on the rise again, games wise, it just is much more viable for people to have ideas and bring them through to development and release, rather than just sitting as an idea in the cupboard somewhere. Yeah,
like I also suppose like of course in recent years the university has been pushing for this kind of thing as well, especially with different universities like University of Ulster and Queen's, offering like different games development courses, and
or like obviously our college, there's an animation courses coming with your guy Greg McGuire. And like obviously he's come over. There's a few people who've started coming back here as well, who maybe had gone off, like himself. He went off to work with ILM, I think it was, for a few years. But there's a few guys like that who've been coming back from America, who maybe were in the last sort of generation of ones that were like maybe pushing the industry, especially in England, in that sort of way. And now that they've come back, they're trying to help push it themselves, because they want to see it kind of on the rise the way it was, where they had to go to. And I suppose that's one of the other things that we were kind of thinking about, was the fact that, fair enough, we could have gone off and tried to get a placement in somewhere like England or Canada or wherever, but at the same time, there is the potential for that industry to grow here. So why not try and set something up ourselves so that we can add to the idea that there's something there.
That's always great,
And hopefully one day Northern Ireland can be in the big boys table.
The big boys table. Fingers crossed for that one. So how many people are in your team? Is it 3?
There's three full members, and then we've kind of had a couple of guys coming in and out. We had a guy part time over the summer, and we had our project manager for 6 months from February through to the summer as well. But so the team's got core 3, but kind of is fluctuated in size between the two of us at the start through to 5 or 6 at one point.
Okay, and then you all have your strengths and weaknesses. How well do you all play off each other?
So far surprisingly well. There's been very little arguments at least.
Pretty much none, really.
Yeah, obviously David, who didn't make it today, he's definitely the master coder when it comes down to it. And we just we generally have worked quite well, despite obviously all coming from a programming background in terms of our degree. The two of us had a little bit of art behind us from secondary school and that sort of thing, whereas David had a very heavily computing background. That kind of worked well as well with the two of us are more happy to kind of do the sort of management and kind of PR sort of side of things, whereas so in that sort of sense we've got so far a nice sort of balance.
Okay, cool. And then is it true you took on a sort of work placement from a wee student?
We took on multiples then.
3.
Yeah,
3. We had 3 over the last few months, a couple of lads and a girl from all 3 from secondary schools. And they came in for a week or so and all seemed to really enjoy it. Especially the last one we have ended up pretty much putting together a game herself at the end and threw it up on our edge page and especially the first 2 maybe it was interesting seeing the different sort of interests, because they were all coming in deciding whether or not they were interested in going into that side of the industry, and it's interesting seeing the different reactions, where you had one was kind of very much focused on just talking about what was going on,
really passionate,
and then you like she came in and just wanted to work away and kind of get something built to be able to show what she could achieve, and which was very interesting to see.
David did a fantastic job on it. David did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Do you think that young blood really gave you some sort of inspiration to keep going?
Yeah, because there's a few characters and a few ideas and things that like in that are probably going to be as a result of what they.
Okay, well that's great. Yeah, that's really good. You took a break, making your main game Slime vs World, to work on the side project of Slime Mode.
Yeah.
Do you think this benefited your main game?
Vastly. For a start, it was around the time that we the platform was initially on a different engine. It was kind of because we worked with XNA, which obviously is dead at this point.
Yeah.
The process of transferring it over to Unity, which was a piece of software we hadn't used before, was kind of taking this toll, and that we were kind of spending almost more time learning the engine than we were actually getting stuff progressed. So taking the time out and working on something completely fresh and just like shorter development cycle and just more fun was helpful in that sense, that we learned a few bits and pieces of what not to do as well, which was very interesting.
Fair enough. So you're all students.
Yep.
Do you find it difficult to support yourselves or maintain sort of like a really strict discipline whenever you're setting up your own company?
Personally for me, at first it was kind of like it was a totally new experience. It was probably, I'd say, way different than what I would have if I were to work for like a software company.
Yeah.
Because obviously being like working for yourself, you'd have more responsibilities than a normal employee. And at first I struggled a little in trying to like discipline myself to stick to a hard tight schedule every single day. But it was just one of those things where you just gotta force yourself. Every morning you just gotta force yourself up and just kind of like get used to it, and then just go with the flow.
That was the other thing why we, like you were saying about working on side projects and that sort of thing, that like in general I enjoy working on the stuff, which is the main reason I wanted to do it. It wasn't because I wanted to, well, obviously making money out of it is the key goal, but at the same time it was to work on my own ideas and my projects. And because of that, then if we did start to feel fatigued with a certain project, you could switch to another one. And when I'm enjoying my work, I'll work at it, which ended up being that you'd have maybe 2 or 3 days straight working like 12-hour days, and then you could kind of ease back, which is something that was a lot nicer than having the sort of 9 to 5 sort of schedule where you might be in the middle of something but have to cut it off if you're working in an office sort of environment.
Yeah, to be fair, out of the entire year, mostly the most enjoyable part was all the development and all the design part.
Yeah.
At first the business part was probably like new to us, so
it was interesting.
It was interesting enough. That was totally new, and we were going in kind of like, we weren't going in blind because we did our research. We did research on it. I did have some basic kind of knowledge from like business studies back in secondary school. So I was handling most of the things at first, but then me and Connell, we went into the course during the year. It was at Belfast Enterprise Academy.
Yeah, which was very helpful as well, because it actually, you were saying about maintaining the sort of structure and kind of stopping yourself kind of falling back. It wasn't regular, but it was sort of semi-regular, like workshops and that sort of thing that would kind of hit midweek as a result of being on that scheme, and it would be like obviously talking about marketing or the business side of things, creating obviously the business plan and things like that you maybe as developers, I know a lot of indie devs kind of would very much focus on getting the ideas built, but then realise that they haven't got the kind of infrastructure outside of that, which was something that was very helpful to kind of get a bit more knowledge behind. But having that sort of regular sort of sessions, even if it wasn't tied down to what we were actually working on, was kind of helpful to kind of keep you sort of on a sort of steady schedule, which was quite good, really.
Like it's just one of those things where this is to like any future students that would want to like set their own company in the future during their placement year. All I can say is Belfast Enterprise Academy, really big help. Even if it's maybe some of it's not relevant to them, still useful knowledge, very useful knowledge. So I advise them to go towards that.
Sounds great.
That's good advice. Certainly if they're in the local area anyway.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Where is it? Where did you say it was?
It's based through the Belfast City Council. But it's actually switched to being, I think this year, they've got their sort of base in the Queen's Student Union in terms of like running their sort of meetings and that sort of thing. But no, it's just the council run thing, which we were kind of geared to. That was one thing that the university was very helpful with, was kind of guiding us to to who we should be speaking to in order to kind of, if there was any difficulties we were having, or just in terms of guidance, which was obviously a good thing to have a fallback on at least.
When you were talking about Slimebo and it being your mini game, what was the process, like your personal process of going through having this game concept and then bringing it to fruition?
Well, initially it was like we did start by kind of going, we need a break from the main project, and we just sat in the hatch, our office space, and basically just threw out random words. That was literally what it was.
Yeah.
And I think Rainbow did get thrown out, and we kind of were talking about, because the main mechanic was the idea of the colours, and how rather than controlling an endless runner, you usually control the movement of the character. This idea was to control the colour of the character and how that would influence it.
Yeah.
So basically we just took what we had been working on with Slime vs. the World, rotated the camera, locked his movement, and then we just kind of dived into it and started working on. Obviously we had a lot of the art assets kind of, maybe you had to tweak them or whatever, but the kind of general sort of concepts were there.
Okay.
And it was a case of, we built a really rudimentary sort of blocks would come down and in like a set pattern, and would, like, just to get the mechanics of them disappearing or whatever, that sort of way. And just, I don't know, it was just really a case of worked at it solidly until we had something that was fun, was the main thing. That's one thing with games development especially, is the hard thing is to know where to stop, because obviously you can keep going, but once you get to a point where you kind of feel that, even as the person who's made it, you've played it far too many times at that point, probably if you get to a point where you can kind of enjoy playing it, it's obviously much better than if you're playing it and going, well, the mechanics are there, they should work. But if the mechanics are there and they're fun, was kind of our goal initially.
Last year, there seemed to be a trend in the games industry with the Kickstarters and the early access and maybe the revival of the survival horror genre.
Yeah.
What do you think this year's trends will be?
This year's trends, there'll probably still be a steady rise for early access games. That's what I personally think. But in terms of Kickstarter, I'd probably say it wouldn't be as popular as previous couple of years because of all the bad press that some of the Kickstarters have got.
Yeah.
Where games be promised these set goal lists that the devs promise people that kickstarted. You can't just like abandoning an idea or just releasing an unfinished game without them. So I think Kickstarter won't have much of a, well, it'll still have a presence for at least a couple of years.
I think what's more likely to happen is that the whole crowdfunding scene will become a lot more kind of steady. Yeah. In that sort of sense, where rather than constantly trying to push to rinse people as much as they can, devs will start focusing on kind of giving reasonable goals and looking like kind of. I saw there's a local team that they're working on. I think it's recently hit Steam early access. Predestination. And they, as far as I know, kind of did a second. Like they did their initial Kickstarter and then did a second one for like the expanded content. Yeah. Rather than doing a huge big Kickstarter and pushing for like all the features and getting all that done, they kind of got that the audience was there for that title, and then we're offering a build. Yeah. Like to build upon that, which I think was where a lot of, certainly in that sort of area is where a lot of people going wrong. But in terms of other trends, I think this year, whether it will just die like 3D did, I think VR is going to become very heavy again. Yeah. That's right. Like not just the Oculus, but the fact like obviously Valve are just recently were saying about their own version of it, like despite having obviously worked with a bunch of other teams for their project of it, and I can't think what it's called, but there's a team working on a set of plugins that will basically uniformly grab the VR technology and kind of, I think that's the main issue with it, that it can't take off at the minute, is that each piece of equipment has its own set of like coding libraries and things that need to be run through, whereas I know there's people working trying to generalize that, so that if you have any sort of device and the game says it will work with VR, you'll be able to set up the game to use any of the devices rather than just one, which...
So make it more cross-platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the Morpheus as well.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
it's Morpheus is the other one.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting if they are successful in kind of making it cross-platform. Then I do see that somewhere it can go. Obviously Microsoft with their fake holograms.
Yeah. HoloLens or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Not. I'm personally against the term holo because they're not actually holograms. But again, it's interesting sort of tech, and much nicer the fact that it's not completely enclosing the person, which I think is one of the main issues that people have faced. Like the Oculus, where you have no idea what's going on outside of that, which could be problematic for a lot of people because it might see a rise again in sort of single player games, which could be quite interesting, where if you're using something like that, it's very much a solo experience. You were saying about the survival horror games coming back into.
For a lot of people using it for elite daters. People getting really submerged in that game,
that's another sort of thing. So that's like, I think those sort of like solo sort of journeys where there's a huge trend now to just slap multiplayer into everything. Like even like Assassin's Creed obviously was very much a single player, Mass Effect, all those kind of games. Granted, some of them worked really well, but I think it's probably going to go back this year towards solid single player or a multiplayer game rather than trying to chuck everything in at once.
Yeah, look, recently there's been a lot of, like, on Steam there's been a lot of, even for early access or non-early access, there's been a lot of kind of like open world survival games now, like being single player or multiplayer. There's a lot of them popping up, so I think they probably might be popular for a little while, probably not too long, but for a little while.
I think the next big one is it the Forest or something.
Forest, yes.
It looks pretty promising as well.
Yeah, like don't know if you've ever heard of Don't Starve.
Don't Starve,
yes. Originally it was promised to be a single player experience. Like everyone was like skeptic of such a game being like having multiplayer because the single player worked really well. And mind you, it was one of the best early access games out there in the past couple of years. Like where ones like the indie devs actually did it right. Where they provided like a good steady pace of a big massive update every 2 weeks, pretty much up to for 2 years, maybe 1 or 2 years, where they actually finished the game, released it, and then they released an expansion pack. And it's from what I've heard and seen statistics and reviews, it's been a really really big hit of the like an open world survival crowd. And a couple of months down the line, a multiplayer has spawned from it. Miracles happen, like.
Well, obviously that's a good point in that I was saying earlier about the Kickstarters being more reasonable with what you're offering. I do think as well, like the whole idea of everything being thrown on early access hopefully will kind of die down in a bit, so that people will actually, whenever they're working on projects, put the time in to make sure that they're a working game, which there was another trend for the past year, was games being released that just did not work.
War Z.
There was plenty more than that,
Freaking Unity.
Exactly. Is there anything else you would like to see, like this year personally, as a big trend?
I don't know. I'd probably like to see probably a bigger it's probably been a popular trend a couple of years back, but I'd like to see it rising again, like handhelds, like handhelds, just like 3DS and.
Yeah, the new 3DS is out now. I think it's been going on the store.
Obviously I picked up on myself, or like I got the early adopter one. I do think it'll be interesting. That's one thing that might, maybe not this year, but I think it's coming, is the merging of handheld and console. Much more, like obviously you've seen Sony kind of attempting it with the Vita PS4 crossplay, but then they failed to remind people the Vita existed. Whereas like I do think though, well, I'd actually forgotten that. But in that sort of sense, I can see devices being released that are maybe can link up to like a box that'll like stream it to your TV or whatever, but you can more kind of play on the go and then throw it up and up all the detail onto the bigger experience, as opposed to that whole definition of having strictly console or strictly handheld. Like obviously a lot of the indie games that are coming out are very much cross-platform, and then they're dropping onto the Vita and they're dropping onto, I think 3DS is getting Unity support in a couple of months as well, which obviously will open up a lot of things as well.
The Wii U's still doing that now.
Yeah.
They literally switch between the controller.
Yeah, that's I mean, like that whole concept of being able to, even if it is just within your house, to throw it onto the controller and continue playing there. I think that's something where they could do a lot more with. And actually, you were saying about what trends I'd like to see. I'd like to see a lot more local multiplayer come back.
Yeah.
But expect that sort of asymmetric kind of gameplay that the Wii and I've seen it like tablet to PC kind of mechanics work quite well. Where if one person has it, their own device, or even if it's multiple handheld devices, designed in such a way that you can, like, one player can only see what's going on, and like they maybe had a broad overview of what's going on, and everybody else is kind of panicking around the screen, that sort of thing. But it's somewhere that there's a lot of potential in terms of gameplay and just ideas.
Yeah.
I think could come from there.
Great. So last question. Okay, I promise.
Alright.
When is your game coming out?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
They were working with a couple of artists actually at the minute to try and bring forward our release schedule for the Slime vs. the World in particular, which I'm sure if you've played a bit of the early build of our game, that mechanically it's close to finish. Just needs a few tweaks, but it's just a case of once we got an artist sorted, it should be hopefully out full summer at least.
Fantastic.
And we're also potentially doing a relaunch of Slimebo with
more features.
a few features and things that we promised a few months back.
Yeah.
And also a colourblind mode, which
Okay.
was that's what was quite interesting.
So
If
just
you
a
decide
lot.
to make a game about colours, is that you need a colourblind mode.
And this is already out on Android, isn't it? Slime was
Android,
iOS.
On iOS.
Yeah.
How long's that been up for?
That has been out a long time now.
Since March.
I think it launched in March, yes.
March.
And I saw it's been doing quite well. A lot of countries.
Yeah.
Oh
it's
yeah,
been
Interesting.
Good Friday. Good
Really?
Friday across the world, like including like mostly Russia. But
There's Russia
Really?
and Chile,
Yeah.
and because there was a few countries that we kind of got. Like I know there was a guy that I knew in Germany that had downloaded a copy, and we could see that. But then when you start seeing your game pop up in like countries that you have no connection to,
Yeah.
it's really pleasing to see in that sense.
definitely.
Certainly gratifying, and the reviews for it were mostly mostly very positive, which like it's a good sort of way to build upon. Is for the next title, hopefully we can maintain the enjoyment that people had from that with the next one. But
Yeah, like, it did better than we expected. We
Yeah.
expected pretty much no reception of it whatsoever because we pretty much did organic advertising.
Yeah.
We didn't put any money towards it. It was just like through social media, word of mouth and stuff. So it came out well, I guess. Our first project.
Okay, fantastic. Right, well, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem.
Alright,
Thanks
thank you
very
for
much.
coming down. Brilliant.
Thank you.